Dan, welcome to the program.
John, thank you very much.
I appreciate
for
you joining us.
having me.
It's good to see you in this instead of like bumping into you in the field as a former correspondent,
Yes,
right? It's
yes.
crazy. So listen, now you are a best-selling author, a podcaster, a mindfulness advocate. You call yourself a self-proclaimed Buddhist and a happiness evangelical. I want to know why the switch, but listen, I remember you, I remember you talking about, this panic attack that you had on television. But it took you a while to go from television to becoming a self-proclaimed Buddhist and a happiness evangelical. Why the switch?
Well, there was kind of an overlap of, I wrote a book called 10% Happier, and it came out 10 years ago. And I mean, you could have made the case that I might have switched then because the book was reasonably successful, and I started a podcast and a meditation app and whatever. But I loved being a journalist, so I didn't really want to leave that. And if I'm honest, I was very anxious, and I still am anxious. Sometimes people will say to me, you're very anxious for a meditation guy, and I'm like, you have the causality wrong. I'm a meditation guy because I'm so anxious. And so I think that fear had me clinging to two jobs at once, and it took me a long time to gin up the courage to leave.
Well, that's the thing. I think people think, well, when you do meditation and you become mindful that you lose the anxiousness or anxiety or whatever. It doesn't necessarily. It's like, I hate to say this, like an addict. You're always recovering. You're always, so you're always in process.
And you can think of anxiety as a kind of addiction. And I've actually heard it argued that way. That there's a great neuroscientist named Dr. Judson Brewer who argues that anxiety is a habit that we create in order to keep ourselves safe. We think that this worrying and fretting and plotting and planning is protecting us, and a certain amount of it is, but at some point you can cross the line into pathology.
Yeah. I think people think when you're in the public eye that you don't have these things, and people ask me, "Do you get nervous?" You don't get necessarily nervous in front of television, when the cameras go on, but it happens at weird times, right? Like people are like, "Wait, what is happening in this moment? Why am I nervous? Why am I flubbing my words? What have you?" Even Al Roker has said that he has what does he call it? Is it he has anxiety? What does Al Roker call it? He says he suffers from stage fright.
Yeah.
Why do people think that? Everybody has something, Dan, don't you think?
1,000%. Everybody's got something. And I think a lot of our pain and suffering on a daily basis comes from fronting, from pretending we're something that we're not.
Fronting.
Yeah, that we have a facade up, a persona we've built, a brand we've created online that doesn't quite match up with who we know we are. And the difference, the delta there, is the source of an enormous amount of suffering, I think.
So do you believe in fake it? People say fake it till you make it.
I think a certain amount of that is true, but you don't want to fake it too much so that you're not a real person. You're inauthentic, and everybody can smell that. If you're with somebody who feels like they're full of shit, can I?
Yeah, of course. You can say shit. We're streaming.
We're not. You're
not on ABC News right now.
I'm so confused. It feels like I'm back. I think you can tell when you're around somebody who's full of shit that it just animalistically you can sense it, and I think it's a source that, not being true to ourselves, I know it's a little bit cliched, but it feels bad to you. And look, it's easy for me to say this because I've got, I'm not trying to be too self-righteous or virtue signal-y here, but obviously I have all of the privileges imaginable, I do. So it's easier for me to say, be authentic, because I think for other people in the society it is much harder, and I'm aware of that. But I do think that forcing people to be different from what they know they are is a source of pain.
Did you ever, you said you admitted that you played around with, substances, drugs. Yeah. Did you, but this was a legit drug, not that others aren't legit, but something that you can get prescribed. Did you ever think about beta blockers? Did you take beta blockers? I
take beta blockers all the time.
Did you take them when you were on the air?
I took it this morning before coming on to be interviewed by you, because I can explain what beta blockers are, but you said before that you weren't nervous going on the air. I did it for 30 years. I was nervous every time I went on the air.
Every time?
Every time.
When the music came up and whatever, you would freak out.
Not freak out, but it definitely, I wasn't, you I think, I can see, because I've watched you on the air for a million years, you really seemed like I could be in your living room with you. Yeah. For me, I kind of pretended like you could be I could be in your living room with you. In fact, I was in people's living rooms, but I was nervous. And so for me, beta blockers are very helpful. Just for people who don't know what they are, they're non-narcotic. You do need a prescription, but they're not. It's not like taking a Valium where your brain gets a little foggy or fuzzy. Beta blocker just stops your heart from beating too fast, so that you can have the psychological symptoms of a panic attack, like you get nervous, but your body can't rebel. Your body can't go into fear, flight, or fight.
So you took them today. You take them now, but did you take them when you were on the air then?
Every time
you did.
On there, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing for me is that I think that maybe you feel that way because most of what I did when I was on cable news was unscripted. So I was just being me.
Yeah.
When I'm scripted, I can get a like, oh, what am I saying? I'm not sure if this copy's right. So I think just sort of sitting there being me made a difference.
I think that's probably right.
Yeah. Do you feel happier?
Yes. Yes.
Is that 10% happier? Does that, I mean, is that just the name of a book, or do you actually, how do you measure? How does one measure that?
One doesn't measure it. It was kind of a joke, although my editor tried to convince, or actually my publisher tried to convince me to go up to 30% happier, which clearly she did not get the joke. You can't measure it, but it's actually kind of true enough. I don't think that there's some like perfect state that anybody can get to, and I don't think there's a silver bullet.
Yeah.
I do think marginal and messy improvement over time is possible, and it doesn't mean that it's an unbroken upward trajectory. There's a great social media post that I saw about a year ago from a woman named Roshi Joan Halifax. Roshi's her title. She's a Zen master, and she posted a picture, and it had like a squiggly line in it, and then the caption was "the path." And I love that because it doesn't, you know.
It's not always like this, right?
No,
Straight.
because even though I'm a meditation evangelist, a happiness quote unquote expert, that doesn't mean if you find me on a day where I haven't had enough sleep or I've had a tough call with a lawyer or whatever, I can definitely be a jerk or anxious or edgy. And so it's not like I am in a permanent state of bliss, but my happiness set point, my base level is way higher.
Yeah, sleep is really important.
Huge.
So what about antidepressants?
Yes.
Does that help?
Yes. Well, I've taken them, and I do take them largely. I take something called Zoloft, which is a kind of...
I took Zoloft.
Okay.
Yeah, before.
It's, for me, I was given it as a way, I wasn't depressed when I was prescribed it. I was given it as a way to handle panic. It actually has some, but I don't feel it necessarily. So I think antidepressants, I think there's a case to be made for them, and I think there's also a case to be made that they're overprescribed. So it's a bit of a fuzzy line, but I don't, it's not like I'm depressed in a way that I need it. It does help with panic. I mean, for example, you and I are in a studio on the 7th floor of a building in Manhattan. I looked at the elevators, and I was like, I'm not getting in that. It's too small. And I walked up the stairs, and you can't get in on the 7th floor here. So one of the maintenance guys who saw me kind of struggling on Ted, shout out to Ted, rode the elevator up and opened the door for me so that I could get off.
You wouldn't get on the elevator?
No.
Is it claustrophobia or
Yeah.
is it panic? It's too small.
Too small.
I had my first panic attack in getting an MRI during COVID.
Yeah.
Because usually I'm fine and I fall asleep, but it was the mask and the whole. I don't know what COVID did to us, but I had a panic attack and I had to hit the button. It was like, get me out of here. And they're like, you only have 3 minutes left. I don't give up. You know what? Get me out of here. So I can understand that, and I do have claustrophobia, but not to the extent that you do.
COVID made it worse for me because I would have been able to take that elevator pre-COVID, but then I moved to the suburbs. My family and I moved to the suburbs, and I'm not in elevators that much. And so now when I see one that's a little coffin-like that one, I just can't handle it.
Yeah.
But you were saying something before. You tried Zoloft?
Yeah. So I think that I've always had sort of a low-grade depression just from being who I am, like being as a kid, like knowing that I was gay, hiding that thing, that always having that secret. And there was an incident that happened to me as an adult that pushed me into a depression. And so I went to a therapist and she prescribed Zoloft, and I was like, wow, this is great. And then I was able to deal with whatever I had to deal with. And things were fine after that. And then, when I left CNN, I didn't want to go back there. So I went to my therapist, and my therapist prescribed Wellbutrin because, as a man, your job is really, for the most part, right? It's your identity.
Yeah.
So even if you want to leave and you want to become 10% happier, or if you get forced out, it's still a transition that and it can throw you into a depression, whether you want it or not. But that really helped me. And part of it also is that you don't have to get up and go to the studio every day. So some days you just don't get up, right? Some days you're just like in your PJs and you're like, wow, this is great. I'm going to throw another log on the fire and turn on TCM or on Netflix or whatever. But if you're doing, I take Wellbutrin now, but I don't have that feeling anymore. I get up every day and I do my thing and I roll with the punches.
I'm really glad to hear that, and I think it actually. You might not feel like it's a big deal to say that, but I think it's actually a big deal to say it in public because a lot of people watching this may feel that they're dysfunctional because they have anxiety or depression, and I think just talking about it openly is a real service because it normalizes it for people. But there were two things in what you said that to me really struck me. One is, I think for me, I'm not a clinician, but I've done dozens and dozens of interviews on my show on these issues, and using medication as a bridge to help you during a tough time and then going off of it once you've handled those issues, that to me feels really healthy. I'm not saying nobody should ever be on these medications in an abiding form, but I really appreciate the use case that you laid out. The second thing you said
hold on, it's what works for you, and it should be under the direction of a clinician or something.
1,000%, 1,000%.
The second thing?
The second thing was that I was talking earlier about inauthenticity.
It's like a producer in your ear. The second thing.
I appreciate that. Two TV animals here. You talked before, I was saying earlier that there is this pain that can come from pretending you're this, but knowing you're this, and that difference. And you talked earlier about how you felt like you always had a low-grade depression because you're gay in a community that may have felt some kind of way about that.
From the South, and I dealt with racism, and it's 1,000 little needle pricks every day for. Sorry, I keep interrupting.
No, it's your story. I mean, it's more interesting than what I have to say, but I can only imagine that would be a lot to carry.
Yeah, it is a lot to carry. But I realize that obviously I'm not the only person carrying it, but being in a position, such a high-profile position, and going through things publicly, it ain't easy.
Yeah.
As you know, it's not easy. You were saying pretending. Is that a form of, you talk about this term called toxic positivity.
Yeah, I do think so.
Is that a form of that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I was talking to this woman, Susan Cain, recently, who wrote a very popular book about introverts called Quiet. And then she wrote a book about the value of sadness called Bittersweet. And she has this observation about today's social media environment, which is that we seem to have two modes, a kind of toxic positivity, #blessed, or, right?
#blessed, I love that.
Or we have this rage, all caps, condemnation, cancellation mode. And that seems to be all that our culture is comfortable with. Whereas what you and I are hopefully trying to do today, which is just be real about the struggles of being a human being in whatever situation you find yourself. I think we need more of that on our quote-unquote social media, which I think is often quite antisocial, and toxic positivity, I think, is one of the problems. Well,
this is interesting, because you're talking about social media. It reminded me when we were talking about SSRIs of the interview that I did with Elon, and people were like, why did you keep pressing him on ketamine? One, he mentioned it publicly, or I would not have asked him about it, so I thought he was okay with talking about it. But ketamine also, I've done guided drug therapy before, and once he gave that answer, I was like, yes. What you just said to me, I think that's helpful for people to know that, because people think taking drugs, like you can't, I can do this, I can go and I can pray it away, or I can focus on other things, or I'm bigger than that, I don't need those drugs.
I think maybe that's true for you, and as you said before, it's up to everybody to make that decision, but I do think we should destigmatize these medications. They are an option, they're an imperfect option, but if you're working with your doctor, as you said earlier, and that is something that the doctor suggests, and it's worth investigating as an option. There are no silver bullets. I actually am kind of the view that we should be investigating all options.
Yeah, and it's also that and relating to each other. Social media, I think, plays a big role in people's psyche and depression
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
Because you're always looking at somebody else's life, and what you're seeing is the best. What you see on the internet most of the time, or on social media about me, is like something that I want you to see, right? I want you to see, oh, look, Don is out fishing. He caught a big fish, right? Look, oh, he's on a great vacation. Look how tan he is. And so you're constantly looking at the best in people's lives, and you don't see them at their worst when they wake up and they've got, you know, a booger and...
Check out my new alpaca suit. Like, you know, this is an alpaca suit he's wearing. Awesome.
But you know what I mean?
Yes, I absolutely know what you mean. And I think there are several ways in which social media can mess with our heads. One is because it puts us into this state of toxic comparison, because we're looking at other people's toxic positivity, and we're comparing our humdrum, booger-filled lives with their, you know, big fish that they've caught, or the party they're at that you weren't invited to. I think there's also the fact that the algorithms incentivize rage. And by the way, I'm not anti-social media. I'm on social media. I just think it's like how I feel about capitalism. I'm a capitalist, but I think there are real problems in the system that need to be pointed out. And with social media, one of them is that the algorithm incentivizes rage. And so that gives us a view of the world that is angry and polarized and pessimistic, that I don't think is actually lined up with the truth.
When you left your former career as a reporter, a correspondent, and an anchor, did it change the way that you relate or interact with people? Because before you were asking questions and getting to, did it help you? Did you become a better communicator even though you were a journalist before?
I have become a better communicator, but I don't know if it's from leaving the job. I actually, 6 years ago, I got a what's called a 360 review. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it, but I don't know exactly.
So it's like an anonymous survey that you hire an executive coach to run with your bosses, peers, and direct reports. And I added in my wife and my brother and a few friends, so 16 people. And the feedback I got was that I was reasonably good communicator, you know, talking to a camera, but not great one-on-one with people. And so I hired some coaches that taught me a lot of communication skills, very simple techniques that have completely changed my relationships.
Completely changed my relationship.
Yes.
See, you're supposed to say the last thing. That's what is that part of it? They say
no,
to show that you're
there's
listening.
Something close. That's close. That is close.
That's close.
So there's a thing called reflective listening, and actually I talk about this all the time, and I think it's worth saying, because this little hack, which is not complicated, not hard to integrate into your life, had a massive impact on the quality of my relationships. I'm saying that phrase again. Okay, so reflective listening works like this, almost what you described. So you're listening to somebody talk, and you kind of assign yourself a journalistic role. I'm going to listen so that I can repeat back the bones of what they've said in my own voice. So they can say several paragraphs to you, but you just repeat back, oh, it's your daughter's wedding this weekend. It's a huge moment in the family's life, right? Just some quick summary of it, which we know how to do as journalists. And that is so pleasing on a primordial level to people, to feel heard.
To most people.
To most people, to feel heard. And what it does for you is, if you're in a contentious conversation and you're summing up the other person's point of view, then actually gives you, it's like a circuit breaker. Because most of the time, if I'm in a contentious conversation, the old me would just be thinking about the thing I'm going to say next, not really listening, but forcing myself to reflect helps kind of keep the temperature low.
The reason I say most people is because some people aren't reflective, right? And they don't see or understand or hear what they're putting out into the universe, and then you start repeating it back and they go, wow, did I do that? Did I say that? So they don't like it. But most people love that you're hearing, if you're, especially if you're talking about a wedding or something positive about that. Can we talk about we talked about medication, let's talk about meditation.
Okay.
I have the meditation app on my phone, and I try and try and try, and you know, sometimes it's really good, where I can do my whole 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, right? I try. Okay. I try. And then other times I'm like, you know, the light bill, the water bill, I got to do this, I got to do this errand, the blinds are broken, and you're just like, you can't get it. There's no perfect way to meditate, correct?
I have so much to say about this. Let me just ask you a question. When so is the problem in your mind that you're not doing it consistently, or that when you do it, you're getting too distracted?
No, the problem in my mind is that I feel like it should be perfect. Like if I have, because I have a mantra, right? When you try Transcendental Meditation, TM, I like to. So I have a certain mantra that I do. But I feel like it should be, everything should just be like Om, and I should wake up and it felt like 30 seconds when it was actually an hour. I just feel like it should be perfect like that, but it's not that way.
It's almost never that way. And meditation is like a totally jacked up video game where if you want to move forward, you can't move forward. Desire or greed or wanting anything is a hindrance to progress in meditation. So the point of meditation is not to try to achieve anything, it's to be cool with whatever's happening. And that is like a radical move, especially for very ambitious type A people who are trying to win at a thing. And so it's a big struggle that many people have. So what you want to do is learn to be cool with the distractions and to see that the distractions are not a problem. They're actually, that's actually the moment where you're succeeding. To understand that over time, as you see what your mind is really doing, the light bill, the shades are broken, you're planning a homicide, whatever it is, you're becoming more...
That too.
Yes, of course. And then you're becoming more familiar with the wildness of your own mind, so that when you're not meditating and your mind feeds you up a terrible idea, you don't act it out blindly. And that, I think, is the money shot.
Yeah, but also, it's also, I have to say this, I appreciate the wisdom of my mother, because she'll just say to me, which is, I think she's sort of saying what you're saying. She just says, baby, it is what it is.
Your mother's right. I mean, that is, and tuning in to what it is a way not to struggle with reality. We spend so much of our time, hurling ourselves into the next hit of dopamine, the next pleasurable activity, checking things off of our to-do list. But how many summers do you think we have left?
Amen.
Right?
That's how I live my life that way.
Yes.
Oh wait, that was a good one. Wait a minute. I love your. Wow, nice. Okay, so.
This is stuff we could not do. We could not do this in our old jobs.
We could not do that. Well, I could. I mean, I did stuff like this. It's probably why I'm not there anymore. So you can be way too honest. You can be way too honest.
Yeah.
So wait, what were you saying? I got.
Oh, how many summers do we have?
How many summers do you have left? Yes, I live my life that way. I'm a man of a certain age. I'm 50-something. It's like I got a couple left, but. And you can't take it with you. No. As well.
Right, so that what I'm saying is, when your mom says it is what it is, we spend so much of our life struggling with what is right now.
Yeah.
Instead of waking up to this is reality right now, good or bad.
She always says to me too, when I'm worried, she goes, Don, 90% of the shit I worried about never happened, so stop worrying.
Yes.
I'm just like, okay, that's easy for you to say. You're an older person and you've lived. Let's talk about the meditation industry. Like I said, I have the meditation app on my phone. I think a lot of people have it. Doesn't mean they necessarily do it or what have you. You talk about this, you call it the commodification of inner peace.
I don't remember saying that, but it sounds good.
Okay. What do you think of, I should say, if you didn't say that, what do you think of this sort of commodification of inner peace?
Look, if people perceive the capitalism infusion into the world of spirituality as being a problem, then I'm part of the problem. So because I started my own meditation app and I sell books and sell ads on my podcast, and I understand that critique, and I actually think there's something to it. There's a phrase, Mindfulness.
Yeah, I was going to say, you called it Mindfulness.
No, I didn't. That's also not mine.
It's not yours, but you use it.
But I do think there's something that people who criticize people like me who have brought capitalism into Buddhism and spirituality, I think they have some good points. I also think this is the system in which we operate.
Right.
And if you want to reach the maximum amount of people, this is I don't see many other options.
I agree with you 100%. Look, you have to make a living and what have you, but it's also making people aware of what you've learned, and it may help them.
Yeah, that's my goal. That's my goal. But of course, do I have the motivation to have my business succeed and get paid and all? Of course, that's in there too. And so the question is, does that motivation spoil the rest of the endeavor. I don't think so, but I do think it's delicate, and that somebody in my position who really, I do view myself as somebody who's trying to help people. I mean, to remind myself, I actually got a little tattoo right next to my watch to help me remind myself.
Can you say what it is?
Yeah, so it says for the benefit, it's actually an acronym, FTBOAB, for the benefit.
Can you put it right here? I don't know if they can get it, but anyway, it's right there.
There it is.
On his
list,
yeah.
I got it, my wife and I got tattoos over the summer, and part of it is this very issue is I wanna be as mindful as possible about keeping my priorities straight. And so it's easy for my priorities to get warped by greed or selfishness or desire or self-centeredness, and that's gonna happen, nobody's perfect. But to the best of my ability, training up the mental muscle of altruism is definitely on my agenda.
Yeah. Now let's see if I have this quote right from you. When you talk about Buddhism, you said it's a set of practices that help you understand fundamental truths in your bones, right?
I think that sounds like me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are the truths for you?
I think one of them is impermanence. So in Buddhism, there are three principles, one of which is going to be hard to talk about, but three core truths that are not metaphysical. You don't have to believe in anything. And this is why, as a sort of atheist or agnostic, Buddhism is a comfortable place for me. But one of them is impermanence. And we were talking about this already. It's how many summers do you have left? Everything is changing all the time, including you, including everybody you know. We're all going to die. And this building one day will come down. And that is reality. And struggling against that leads to the second truth, which is suffering. That life is not going to be perfect. And if you're struggling against that, it's gonna be unsatisfying. And so that's the second of the three.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. And then the third is, and this one's a little tricky, and we can talk about it or not, which is that...
Are you going to talk about duality or no?
Yes, actually, non-duality, which is that we feel, in our bones, we feel like we are separate from the rest of the universe, peering fretfully out from our eye sockets at the rest of the world. But we are inextricably interwoven into the world. There is no, if you close your eyes and look for dawn, you can't find it. You know, there is no core nugget of you that is divisible from the universe. We are all intertwined. And so that's a big concept, but it is true.
How much of that is I guess it's our responsibility. I wonder how much I contributed, and still do, to that, especially when you look at the state of our politics, the state of our communication, the news media.
The feeling of being separate.
The feeling of being separate, but also not many people communicate the way that we're communicating now.
Yeah.
It's all about politics. Oh, you're far right, you're far left, you're liberal lefty, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think this is one of the biggest problems in the world right now, and it's one of the, and again, I'm not trying to bash all social media, but it is one of the.
It's not just social media. It's traditional media. It's cable media. It's everything. It's the internet.
You said before you were wondering whether you contributed to the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder about that. I always try to communicate with people, but my thing is, for me, is I was in an industry and still where facts matter, the truth matters, and we've gotten so far. We don't have a shared idea, or not even an idea. We don't have a shared belief on what facts are and what truth is at this moment.
Yes, that's a huge problem.
And it is a huge problem.
And we each exist in our communities exist in their own echo chambers.
Right.
And we're not talking to each other, so that reinforces the lack of a shared reality, and we're vilifying each other. And we've got a lot of, I think the phrase is, conflict entrepreneurs out there who are making a lot of money vilifying the other side, and all of the economic incentives are for them to keep riling up the base, and it's a real problem on both sides or on all sides. I worry about it.
Does this, doing this, what you're doing now, did it affect your politics? Did it move you one way on the needle, further left or further right?
No. Although sometimes I wonder whether I'm becoming a low information voter, because I don't follow it the way I used to.
Oh my gosh, same here.
Really?
Well, I always say, even when I was in cable news, I try to, you're in a bubble, right? Because if you work for, company B, you do the things at company B, you do it their way, right?
Yes.
And so every day it was like, this is a story, we're doing this, blah, 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 what do you think, whatever. And I would just go and do it. But then afterwards, my sort of diet for what I consumed it was different.
After you left.
Yeah, because even then I said, but when I was working, and I believe this even more now, I would say you can be informed without being inundated.
Yes.
And so,
yes.
I can choose to, I don't get the alerts anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I want to know things, I'll dial into it and I'll actually read fact-based things or look at organizations that are fact-based. So it's different now.
So I had a very similar experience. Actually, mine started before I retired. So I retired in 2001, and but I was kind of going part-time over the preceding 3 or 4 years, and I realized I was not watching the news anymore. I loved being, I was the co-anchor of Weekend GMA, Good Morning America, and I loved the kind of on-set excitement and banter. That was really fun for me. And I also loved going out into the field and doing big investigative stories. Yeah. But following every little jot and tittle of the news cycle was not interesting.
Micro breaking news on this. Breaking news, Donald Trump did this. And you're like, why do we need to know that? Breaking news is like, why do we need to know that? And so I don't watch the news.
Yeah, well.
It's kind of crazy, right?
Both.
I stopped watching it when I was on the news.
Isn't that interesting? So
wow. I loved the process. Like I loved hosting a show.
Yes.
I loved I loved interviewing people.
Yeah.
I loved going out on stories. But I didn't necessarily like the way it was presented.
And it sounds like neither of us is in our marrow so much a news junkie.
Nor political.
Yeah, right. So we like stories, we like being we like the act of hosting a show and interviewing people, but being addicted to every little micro movement in the news cycle is not, that's not how we're wired.
All right, but can we just go, like, this is gossip. So what do you, so what do you think about the craziness right now? Honestly, we have a president of the United States that is, facing, 80 some, whatever counts, 4 court cases. The first president to be sitting in a criminal trial. It's crazy. Do you miss it, and what do you think of it?
I don't miss it. In fact, when I do follow the news. I'm not a low information voter. I tend to listen to podcasts and read Substack.
Of course.
But I don't watch TV news.
Yeah.
As I listen to people. I was on the phone with a former colleague of mine who now works for a cable news outlet, not your former employer, and she was outside the courthouse covering the Trump trial, and I was like, I am so glad that I am not there.
Yeah.
I don't miss that.
Yeah.
I do think I am actively worried about the political situation in the country and the world, though.
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah, of course I am.
Yeah.
I'm worried about it, but you can only worry so much, and you can put out what you want, right? What you think the universe wants and what people need. I actually cover now. I cover from my living room. So I come in and I do these shows, I do the shows that I want to do in this studio, and then at 5 o'clock, I go on YouTube Live, and for 20 minutes to an hour or whatever, I just talk about whatever I want to talk about. I talk about stuff in the courtroom or whatever,
right.
and people tune in. It's kind of crazy. And it's fun. And guess what? There's no teleprompter, so I don't get nervous about it. I don't have any more to talk about. It's so liberating and freeing.
So this is, I think, one of the really cool things about this era in media. It's been horrible if you're running a major news outlet, a cable news or a broadcast news outlet, or in many, many newspapers. It's a very difficult time because the ad market is collapsing. The economic underpinning of the whole thing is collapsing, and that is really scary for many of the people who work there and are running those organizations, and I have actually a lot of compassion for that, and as I'm sure you do too. But at the same time, a very exciting thing is happening, which is there's no barrier to entry. I can start my own media company with very few people, as you have, and that's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. You're pretty cool. Why didn't we hang out before?
We have a very good mutual friend.
We do.
Jay Suris.
Oh my gosh. Sorry about that. No. That's an inside joke. Look it up. Dan Harris, best of luck to you. I appreciate it. Do you have anything coming up that you want to talk about? You got a book? Anything?
I just handed in, after 6 years, I just handed in a new draft of a book that I've been working on that will hopefully come out in a year and a half. I've got some more work to do on it, but I just handed in a draft.
And your podcast is?
10% Happier.
10% Happier.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan Harris.
Thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching The Don Lemon Show. Make sure you click on the image in the top right to subscribe to my channel and the thumbnail in the bottom right to watch more content from my show. And I'll see you next time.